Well, what an honor to be here today. The energy in this room is just incredible. And to be up on this stage, this beautiful setup here is simply amazing. So I'm honored to be here. And let me be on this historic day, thank you very much, let me be the very first from the colonies to wish you a very happy Independence Day. It had to happen. Anyway, you might be wondering, why is a boy from Canada standing up here at the Scottish Cardiac Arrest Symposium? And I think the reason that Gareth invited me is because, believe it or not, we also have a problem with out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in our country. And we as well are trying to unite as a nation to deal with this problem of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And unfortunately, we don't have the same support that you do from your government as far as a unified national approach to cardiac arrest. So we've had to take it upon ourselves to organize research scientists, frontline providers, in-hospital providers, and some decision makers have come together in the Canadian Resuscitation Outcomes Consortium. So this is a consortium that's been born out of the American-Canadian consortium called the Resuscitation Outcomes Consortium, which was very fruitful, but the funding from there has come to an end. So we've gathered together in Canada to try and continue that work. And as it turns out, Scotland and Canada are actually quite similar in many ways. We have lots of urban settings. We have lots of rural settings, which form their own challenges as far as out-of-hospital cardiac arrests go. We each have delicacies that cause many, many cardiac arrests. This is my dinner last night, and I'm still having an odd central chest pain, which is radiating up into my left shoulder. But at home, we have the same problem with poutine. This is a French-Canadian delicacy, which involves French fries, gravy, and cheese curds, which are all the good things that we make in Canada. And in fact, we have another similarity that neither of us have football teams in the European Championship. All right, to the business now. So, luck. You've heard people say luck here today. I heard Gregor say luck today. And in fact, I will put to you that this is the most important ingredient in whether people live or die when they suffer cardiac arrest. Luck. You need to be lucky. I'm not very lucky. I never win the lotto. I'm terrible in casinos. And I'm worried that if I have a cardiac arrest, I won't be lucky enough to survive. And my goal, working within the Canadian Resuscitation Consortium and trying to make allegiances with groups like Gareth's, is to try and minimize the impact that luck has on whether we live or die after cardiac arrest. You might think I'm joking, but I did some research on Google. And every time you hear a survivor speak about their survival story, luck is in their story. Here, I feel lucky to be alive, Rihanna's story. I went to the gym, and apparently I collapsed quite suddenly and without warning. Luckily, working out next to me was a doctor, and she gave me CPR while they called an ambulance. Another one. He was lucky. He collapsed near his locker in front of a cardiac surgeon. The physician recognized the symptoms and kept Hawes alive until the ambulance got there. And they go on and on and on. I challenge you to find a survivor story that doesn't use the word luck. But we don't know if this man is lucky. This is an amazing photograph. So I'm sure, how many people are familiar with Google Street Views? Show of hands who use it. So this is Google Maps. It's got a car. Google has a car with a camera with 4 cameras on it driving all over the planet, taking pictures of the entire planet so that we can see street views when we look on a map. And the Google car just happened to catch a cardiac arrest in the wild. This is a very rare picture. There are very few pictures of real cardiac arrests that happen in the wild, so I use this to sort of demonstrate the problem. You can see around here that there are survivors, there are bystanders. Those people hold that man's life in their hands because we know that as fast as we come in our ambulances, as hard as we try to make our dispatch processes slick, in North America at least, it takes us about 6 minutes median, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but the median is 6 minutes. And we all know that 10% per minute decrease in probability of survival happens without CPR and AD. So if we do the math, 6 minutes, you're almost cooked. So most of what we've been talking about today, once we get there, if we don't get the bystanders to act, it's not worth anything. So is this man lucky? Do any of these bystanders that have become bystanders by chance alone, do they know how to do CPR? Are they willing to do it? Do they know where an AD is, and do they know how to use it? We leave it up to luck. But it's not because we don't recognize the importance of CPR. You and I both invest a lot of time, and our countries invest millions of dollars over decades in training the public how to do CPR. We spend millions of dollars and countless hours investing in AEDs, putting them in our communities, training people, and certainly that's an important thing. But when this happens, we do all that work and invest all that money, and then we cross our fingers. And we count on luck. Luck is in our chain of survival, that those things will actually come together. And we know, unfortunately, that they don't in most cases. They don't happen. CPR doesn't happen. People don't know where the public access defibrillator is. But the real tragedy is that in many cases, those resources that we've invested so heavily in are just around the corner. They're just a floor up, just out of sight. There's an off-duty medic in the coffee shop across the street here, and there's a public access defibrillator in the newsstand a couple spots down. And they're not used, and this man dies. And unfortunately, this happens much more often than the wonderful story that Gregor just told us. We celebrate those, and we should, but we need more of those to happen. So enter PulsePoint, which is something that we have been trying in Canada. We've implemented in Canada and the US. And this is a crowdsourcing solution to try and engage those assets that we have created in the community into the formal response to cardiac arrest. So we don't leave it up to chance any longer. We engage them and integrate them. First, what you have to do with PulsePoint and other apps like this is you have to engage the community. You have to tell people about it, and they put it on their mobile phones. And you get as many people as you can with these apps on their phones in the community. When there's an emergency call, so 911 in my country, 999 here, there's a call. And with PulsePoint, the software has been inputted into the computer-assisted dispatch. And the call taker's job and the dispatcher's job do not change at all. It's hands-off, it's in the background. The system is scanning for certain conditions in a public location, and certain MPDS codes, or tags to the call, which go along with an unconscious, not breathing normally person. And when those conditions are met, the system fires automatically. And what it does is it sends the location information to a server through the internet, and it looks for users with the app on their phone within 400 meters of that emergency location. And it sends them a signal. So their phone rings and beeps and vibrates. And when they open their phone, they get an interactive map showing their own position in real time, the position of the emergency, and any registered nearby AEDs that are in the system. So it gives this bystander now who's out of line of sight, where the AED is out of line of sight, the emergency, now brings those together and gives opportunities that were not available before because of this new technology. The power of this system is illustrated in this incredible map shot. So this is an actual shot showing the San Francisco Bay Area where it was first implemented, and those red diamonds that you can see there are pre-existing stands for ambulances or fire trucks, the pre-existing response. After implementation of PulsePoint, you see this new layer of response that can activate with a 911 or emergency call. This is a new layer of responders ready to respond to cardiac arrest, provide CPR, and use an AED. This is just a couple of weeks after implementation. Since then, now in San Francisco, there's about 25,000 responders. And I would put to you that this concept, the concept of crowdsourcing basic life support for cardiac arrest, is potentially the most important innovation in cardiac arrest since we invented CPR. Because until now, we've had a missing link in the chain of survival. But as technology has advanced, we can call taxis, we can deliver pizza, we can do lots of other things with our phones. But now we can maybe help us respond better to cardiac arrest. And just talking about cell phones, I've had an incessant stream of text messages from my wife because she's watching the Scottish pound take a dive. And she says, as soon as you finish talking, I want you to take your once meek but now mighty Canadian dollar and run to Princess Street and buy as much candy and clothing as you can. So that's where I'm headed right after this. So PulsePoint has been very successful so far in North America. So there's over 1,500 communities with this implemented. There are over 750,000 app users ready to respond and now linked in with their emergency services. There have been 9,000 cardiac arrests since 2005, and there have been 23,000 citizen responders sent to calls. And they've had numerous saves documented. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit, as soon as I heard about this, I was just absolutely intrigued and absorbed. As a resuscitation scientist, this just seemed, for me, I didn't invent it, but it was a eureka moment by proxy. And I said, I have to get to know this foundation, and I have to bring it to Canada, and I have to study it. I want to know how it works, if it works, and I want to know how we can optimize it and make it save as many lives as possible, because for me, this was the missing link. So we started doing some preliminary research, and we did a survey of all the people who were sent alerts in the US in early days, and we learned a few important things about implementation. So this is not a piece of cake to implement this properly. We learned a few important things. The radius of activation is very important. So if it's too broad, the people far away are going to get beat by your ambulance service most of the time, and they're going to get disengaged and disappointed, and they'll remove the app from their phone. If you send people too often to things that aren't cardiac arrests, they're drunk people or seizures or people passed out, and as well, you lose engagement with your audience, and you're bringing people to things that they can't really help out in. So you've got to really tailor those activation criteria carefully for your system based on the things that really catch as many cardiac arrests as possible and try not to catch too many of the other stuff that you don't want them to come to. But we learned that when people get on scene and they get ahead of the ambulance or the fire department, they arrive and there's actually a person there who's unconscious and not breathing. More than 80% of that group of people did CPR. And that to us was a signal in a small subgroup of people in the survey that this could really work. So we pushed on. When we started speaking to municipalities and to communities who wanted to do this from the grassroots, when we started speaking to decision makers got really frightened. They started thinking about privacy problems and liability and other things. So we went and did a public opinion poll of the US and Canada. It was weighted, so it represented the demographics of those two countries. And we found that overwhelmingly, more than 70 to 80% of the public, of lay people, when they were described what cardiac arrest and pulse point is, said, I would be very comfortable with getting rescued through that mechanism. Recently, using a different system, but same concept, this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So this was a randomized controlled trial in Stockholm, which compared activating a system like this versus not activating. So the coals would come in and they would get activated or not, or status quo. And they measured about a 14-15% increase in bystander CPR over a fairly short period of time. It doesn't sound like too much, but in my opinion, there were some limitations of the system. But what was profound was that this was the first time that a technological innovation involving crowdsourcing actually made a measurable increase in bystander CPR. So I think there's some potential there, and I think there's potential for lives saved when we tweak the technology to be optimized. So I'm taking this in Canada. We're engaging the entire province of British Columbia, the city of Winnipeg, and a number of other regions across the country, including about 6 million people, to deploy PulsePoint and study it within the Canadian Resuscitation Outcome Consortium and measure impact. And if I could tell you a secret, I would love to have Scotland come on board with that study. That's my secret. Don't tell anybody. 3%. I want to circle back to AEDs because we have a serious problem with defibrillation. Just think of all the resources and all the excitement about public access defibrillation. And at the end of the day, when you look at all the cardiac arrests that occur, they are used in 3% of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. That is a disastrous failure. And we should all pay attention to this number because they do save lives, but not if they're used only 3% of the time. And they make no economic sense unless we can move that number up. So in Canada, we formed a research group looking at various aspects of AED deployment because we think that 3% number is a disaster. But we also believe that with some smart thinking, some planning, and some innovative technology, that number can come way up. So I've partnered with engineers. We don't usually partner with engineers in medicine, but I've found a wonderful colleague in Tim Chan and another resuscitation scientist, Laurie Morrison, and we've looked at a few aspects of this, and I'm just going to be very brief. We first started looking at the problem of where do we put defibrillators. And right now, I know that we tend to put them quite randomly, and I don't know how it works here, but in Canada, we kind of put them where people want them. And we sometimes put them where we think there's high footfall. But we wondered whether that was a really good predictor of whether they would be in the right location for cardiac arrest risk. So we used our data, about 7 years of cardiac arrest data in Toronto, so we knew where everyone was. And with that data, we could say where the hotspots were for cardiac arrest. So where were the spots that I would avoid the next time I walk through Toronto, because I might drop and have a cardiac arrest. There were spots that were unexpected, so lower population density with higher risk. And you can imagine all sorts of reasons why that might be happening. It might be what is happening in that location, the kinds of activities or building uses, or the demographics of that neighborhood. But we found a few surprises. So we knew that airports were high risk, and certainly we saw that. But we also found that hotels were particularly high risk, convention centers, and prisons. We found that prisons were quite high risk. When we looked at where we had placed our defibrillators in the past, we were dismayed to see that the risk that we had found per building type was terribly mismatched with where the defibrillators were. Most of our defibrillators in Toronto registered with the EMS are in schools. And certainly, I'm not saying that placing defibrillators in schools is a bad thing. There are wonderful secondary gains from teaching kids about AEDs and putting it in their environment. But that's not where cardiac arrests happen. Cardiac arrests happen elsewhere. And so we've just got to think a little more smartly about putting the defibrillators where cardiac arrest is most likely to happen. That's the first step, of course. We went on with Tim Chan, and so he uses mathematics to make magic happen. So he's an engineer, and he uses optimization modeling, which was designed in the Second World War to get resources to the front line in an efficient way. He's applied that technology, that skill and that technique to figure out where to put the next ADs so you get the most bang for your buck as far as hitting the high-risk locations. I'm going to speed up here because I'm running low on time. We also looked at access. So most of the time, when you put ADs in a building, they lock at night. So you can see here in this up and down, the gray shadow is the number of buildings with ADs in them that are open. And as you can see, day by day, all the buildings are open, and at nighttime they close. This is not rocket science. But in the evening hours, after business hours in Toronto, we lose 50% of our public access defibrillators. They're inaccessible. They're behind locked doors. So we have to start thinking about innovative ways of getting the defibrillators outside or getting them in places where people can access them 24 hours a day. Tim Hortons is a national icon. It's a coffee shop everybody loves. They're on every street corner, and they're kitty corner across from each other. We can use optimization modeling to predict what would happen if we partnered with Tim Hortons on a national scale and said, Tim Hortons, we're going to put AEDs in all of your franchises. We can use optimization modeling to say, what is the benefit of that? What is it if we compare that to putting them in all the McDonald's or all the ATM machines? And we can plan using modeling to be smarter about where we put AEDs. Very quickly now, this is Wayne Gretzky. He's one of our national heroes. He's called the Great One. He's one of the greatest hockey stars of all time. So little children grow up wanting to be Wayne Gretzky. And he said once that you shouldn't skate to where the hockey puck is. You need to skate to where the hockey puck is going to be. And so some of the work that we do is a little bit science fiction, not ready for prime time, but we're looking to the future where we might be able to use some innovative things like unmanned aerial vehicles or drones to help us with our rural problem. We have response times of 30 to 45 minutes rurally in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that you have similar problems here in rural Scotland. And although it seems crazy, these defibrillators might be getting flown by drones in the future. So we're experimenting with that, we're piloting it, and using the optimization modeling to figure out where we would put bases of drones, how many drones we would need, what kind of coverage we could get, how much it would cost. So we're trying to get ahead of the game. So I'm going to stop there. I would just say thank you so much for having me here. I really hope to work with Scotland going forward in the future because I think you have a globally unique opportunity to lead and to fix things in Scotland because you have a government, you have scientists, you have frontline providers, call takers, decision makers, survivors, you have the entire spectrum all coming together under wonderful leadership. So you have a unique opportunity to help fix this problem, and I really do hope that we can work together on that. I'll stop. Thank you.
Brilliant work, brilliant work. Has anybody got a question for Steve? Yeah, over here. Thank you.
Hey, Steve. Two questions. The first one is about the cost. Who is underwriting the development of the app and its use more widely? And my second question is how one gets Canadian citizenship.
The Americans are asking that too, as Trump rises to power. Really, I think Canada's going to be the place to be from both sides. So your question is a great one. So PulsePoint Foundation, first of all, just so you know, it's important for you to know that I'm a third party to the PulsePoint Foundation and to Physio-Control, which I'll explain why that's important in a moment. But PulsePoint is a not-for-profit foundation in the United States led by the inventor and founder of the app. His name is Richard Price, who's an ex-fire chief and also an ex-software developer, and a wonderful businessman, in my opinion, a visionary. And I think you'll see the PulsePoint Foundation go far, beyond just this app. So they became too big for them to handle their own internal workings and to handle the demand that came. So they decided to partner with Physio-Control, which, as many of you know, is a device manufacturer, long-standing player in the field of defibrillators. And they made that partnership so that Physio-Control could handle their marketing, their client management, and implementation strategies, because the foundation just was too small to handle that. So they made a partnership. Physio-Control does not have ownership of PulsePoint. They have a contract, which will come to an end at some point, but they have that relationship which now supports their mission, the mission of the foundation. The costs are related to the population served. So initially, PulsePoint was free. It was free for all who wanted it until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when, again, the operation got very large, and they had internal costs, and they also felt that to be sustainable and to be credible, they needed to develop a business model. And so they did. And the costs are dependent on population served, and there's 3 tiers, with the lowest tier kind of being under 300,000 served, and the highest tier being over 1.5 million served. And it's an annual license fee that's paid, and it's very reasonable. So it's in the range of 20,000 Canadian dollars a year for more than 1.5 million served, which I think is less than a defibrillator monitor. So this is certainly not I'm not privy to the internal workings of the business, but my opinion of this is I don't think this is a money-making operation for Physio-Control. I do believe that the intent of the foundation is to just disseminate this as broadly as possible and save as many lives as possible. And I certainly believe in that aspect of their business.
Great. Thank you. We've got another question just up here.
What time do the shops close?
I'm Irish. I think I'm being kicked out of the country later.
Welcome to Canada.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Michael Norton from Newcastle. Can I ask, have you had areas that have turned this down or had big problems because of what we call, is it called DBS now instead of Criminal Records Bureau checks?
We don't have that in Canada, but we do have privacy laws, and there are legal concerns. So you can imagine, I'll tell you that I've spoken to this maybe 100 times, lots of communities in Canada, and the reaction is universally the same. So the first 15 minutes are praise and wonder and really enthusiastic. And then as it turns over into, okay, let's think about doing this, then the decision makers in the room who have to sign off on it start thinking of all the bad things that could happen with a system like this, not just PulsePoint, but any sort of crowdsourcing solution. And there are certain features of the PulsePoint application that kind of prevent against ill will. So people often think about people who might rob others They know the media is there to sort of ambulance chase and come in. There might be privacy issues with sort of people coming in and learning details about people, or just sort of general evilness. And certainly all that is possible, but the broadcasts for the cardiac arrest are very limited. So you have to be within a close proximity to the event already. You have about 6 minutes to do evil, because behind you is a bunch of big burly firefighters and A-type paramedics who will hurt you if you're hurting the patient. And in over, how many did I say? 9,000 events in 7 years, there hasn't been one sort of bad event, and there's been no legal suits or anything of the sort. The privacy is really, I think, the same issue as if a bystander were to come across somebody on the street. A reminder that this is only activating at present in public location cardiac arrests. We're not going into people's homes. We would like to in the future with a vetted second-tier responder who's off-duty paramedic, firefighter, vetted by the system, but at present this is the public, unvetted, who goes to public location cardiac arrest. So there's some safety that this is already in the public sphere as well. But we have had to go to our privacy commissioners, we have had to consult with legal staff, and although there are challenges and concerns, they're all addressable within the Canadian system, the US system, and I believe the UK system.
Thanks, Steve. We've probably got time for one more question. Oh, we've got a couple. Right, hold on a second. Where's the microphone just now? Oh, lovely.
Hello, my name's Sarah Askew and I'm from the British Heart Foundation. Thank
Hi.
you very much for showing our lovely slides earlier. My question is about the people that register for Pulse Point. It says that on the app that they've indicated that they are trained in CPR. We have something similar in the UK called Good Sam, but you actually have to obviously put your first aid certificate. When you say indicated, can you explain that a bit more?
Absolutely. So it really is, the onus is on the person who downloads the app. And it's a fundamental departure from other designs of this sort of thing. And the philosophy of PulsePoint is that to harness the crowd and the numbers, and to basically they're trying to replicate the people who would come upon that person on the floor in the traditional system by chance. And instead of happening just by chance, they're trying to expand the line of sight of those by chance individuals a bit further. And the argument in their philosophy, and I'm sort of speaking for them, but my understanding is that to have to sort of vet everyone's CPR training and identity, one might dissuade many from signing up over fear from litigation, liability, and responsibility. But two, to maintain that over time would be a huge undertaking. And as soon as someone says their CPR is up to date, one day it will expire. And it was thought that, although that's possible to do, the problem with doing that over time might decrease the feasibility of sustainability and also dissuade some services from taking that on. And so there was a fundamental decision made at the design of this, as far as I understand, to really make this a crowdsourcing app that expands the reach of the well-meaning bystander who has the impetus to go and sign up for the app. Now, having said that, our survey shows that more than 75% of people who sign up for the app are healthcare professionals. These are well-meaning people, engaged people. Most others don't want to be involved in this, and that's the problem. If we leave it to chance, most people around there have no wish to be involved in this. And really, if you ask them, want to get as far away as possible from this and let professionals take over. So it's a fundamental difference in the way that Good Sam and some of the other apps are designed, but that's the philosophy of PulsePoint.
Thank you. We've got time for that one question. Where was that one little question? Just over here, and then we'll move on. Thanks, Lewis.
So my name is Scas, I'm a paramedic down in Surrey. Just kind of moving away from the app for a moment, your AED availability graph was quite interesting. As your availability drops overnight, and that's presumably businesses, and you're still working with businesses to provide those AEDs, what's kind of your strategy for managing that? How are you encouraging them not to lock these devices away and to kind of keep them available?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're at ground floor with that because, as is the case here, I think, our AEDs are kind of the Wild West. They're not centrally coordinated, and we do not have a national database. So the first problem is that we don't have one authority managing our AED strategy. It's individuals. The Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, which is a national body, I guess sister to British Heart Foundation in many ways, does have the hope that we can use CanRock, for instance, to develop a national AED registry. And we're actually in the process of speaking with PulsePoint. One aspect I didn't get a chance to speak about is they have an AED registry infrastructure as well that links with the app. And we're talking with the Heart and Stroke Foundation to unify and create that national database. And I've heard that come up in discussions yesterday. But the approach would be first that, I think, to make a registry and understand where these things are. PulsePoint allows people to find them in the community and upload them, the crowd as well. So build that up. And then I think we're looking at strategies of moving AEDs outside. And in Canada, our winters are rough. I'm not going to lie to you, it's very cold. And so pads freeze at 0. The pads don't work below 0. So we need heated boxes outside. We're working with a company related to Philips for those heated outdoor boxes. And also, a slide I didn't get a chance to show you, but my defibrillator at home now sends me an email every day and tells me that its pads are okay and the battery is okay. And so we're moving to trial in Canada a number of outdoor heated boxes that are connected to the Internet of Things so that you can monitor a large number of defibs and make sure they're not only accessible, but they're ready to use, which has been a problem in the past. So we're at ground level with that, small pilot studies, working together as a nation to unify the database. And hopefully that will help us move that 3% up.
Thank you, Steve. I'm
Okay.
sure
Thank you very
you'll
much.
join me in
Thank
thanking
you.
Steve for